Welcome to the How to Overthink podcast. Today we've got James Coursier, who's a good friend of mine and has a really cool story where he went from 30,000 in debt to becoming a millionaire in 9 years. He is now retired, living off a number of different investments, including but not limited to property, and spends a lot of time now on his various passion projects, including helping others become financially free through various different routes. James, welcome to the show. Would you be able to give a bit of background on yourself in terms of where you first came from right up to your route of this millionaire status?
Well, had to answer that concisely. So, I grew up very poor, with a single mother. My father wasn't around in Birmingham, in England. And, life was tough for various reasons. There was a lot of stress in the family because of money. I remember from a very young age just thinking, I just don't want this. I don't want money to be such a stress. I'm actually getting goosebumps just thinking back because I remember how it felt when I was young. And I think that was really what catapulted me into really being very passionate about this area of money and financial freedom. Not through an obsession of money itself. I'm actually don't really own that many expensive things. It doesn't really bother me. It's the freedom that's important. It's being able to choose a life that I want to live rather than having to get up every day and work just to make money to survive, and that was a big part of my focus. So I think many years of really trying to work that out helped me, I guess, get to that point. I think when I started to realize I was solving this, I started to look around and think, geez, actually most people struggle in this area. And I was like, this makes no sense. Most people are actually coming from a better situation than me, and yet they still struggle financially. And I think that took me down the road of why. And then through asking that question and getting the answers, then that got me really into, okay, well, I really want to be a part of the solution here and help other people become financially free, because it's actually pretty simple. It's not easy, but it's pretty simple. It's quite straightforward. But there's some key things that get in the way for most people. And if you can address them, then, it's actually quite straightforward, and many people can do it and do it, right? I think they just need a bit of support because culturally there's a lot of things that, get in the way. And, we typically are the average of the people we hang out with. We follow the path that's set out within our vicinity. So we can get into all of that. I think the other bit maybe to talk about is, I guess, my actual practical journey of how I did it. So when I was young, I didn't really have any role models. I had a mum that was very passionate about education, so I kind of focused on that. And I had society's view of get good grades, get a good job, and everything else will come from there. So I did that. And, I got the good grades. I went to a good uni, and then got a grad scheme at EY. But then as soon as I landed in that job, I thought, this is boring. There's politics. The money isn't actually that good. It's really hard work. It's long hours. Like, I just immediately knew this was not the solution. It was very frustrating because I spent many years getting to that point. So I then went on a journey of slowly pivoting out of there. And so what I did was I moved into an area that was more transferable. I started in tax, in international tax, moved into management consulting because I knew that was more transferable and more enjoyable for me.
A question on knowing that was more transferable and maybe would lead to your next step. How did you kind of figure that out at that point? Were there other people in the company, other people that left the company?
The reason I did international tax at EY is because there were people that came to our university, right? And then everyone's kind of saying, go work for one of these big companies and get on the grad scheme. And then your world's your oyster. Everything, you can go work in other countries, you can move and do different things within the company. Because somewhere like one of these big companies, they do so much. In theory, you can move around. And yes, in theory, but it's actually very, very difficult because these companies don't want you to move around. You've trained within a particular area. So when I realized I didn't want to do it, I thought, right, geez, okay, I need to move to something that actually more enjoyable and my own thing. But then the reality sank in of actually how trapped I was within international tax. So moving externally to another company was even more difficult, pretty much impossible to do something more interesting like consulting. So the only way I could do it was within the company. And even then it was very difficult. I had to work my ass off to make that transition and really prove myself. And I won't get into how I did it, but it was just through massive action, essentially. Once I did that, I trained as a management consultant within the same firm. And then that allowed me to then get the experience to then go it alone. So I left, went independent, started management consulting to companies myself. And then it was by building that money up through doing that I then took that money, invested in various things, including property, and then was able to structure it in a way where I could go, you know what, I don't need to do this anymore. I can retire because my money is producing passive income and I can live off that. It was, I would say, one of the hardest things though is to actually stop, because I actually enjoy my job. I got to a good place. Management consulting is really interesting. It's like problem solving, strategic. I'm working with senior people, right? I don't have to deal with a lot of the politics. But if I was honest with myself, if they weren't paying me, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So if I was really being true to myself of what is my ideal life and what I really want to do, it's not actually getting up and doing that every day. So that's what ultimately made me make the leap and then go full time, trying to design my life and kind of say, right, every day I'm going to do what I actually want rather than what I feel I need to do to just make more money or look more significant, which I think is a bit of a trap sometimes, especially for men.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to, designing a life, at what point did that, in the journey that you outlined, at what point did that come into something very specific where you're like, this is what I'd like it to look and this is how I'll organize it?
In terms of what the ideal life looked like? It's a real journey. I mean, I've spent years thinking about this, in part because I had a really difficult life. And when I was around 15, I, kind of had a realization that my life was going down a pretty lackluster route. And so I was like, right, I'm going to get good grades and I'm going to get confident and do all the things that successful people do. And, in a couple of years, I got really good results. I was, I had lots of friends and good grades and I'd got into a really good uni and got this gap year planned and everything. And I honestly thought I'd solved life. But the reality kicked in a couple of years later when I started university and I got pretty bad depression. And I think just I guess the trauma of having grown up in such a difficult environment finally hit me. And yeah, it was clearly not working. And it was quite a few years of quite unhappiness. And that really made me spend a lot of time in the world of personal development, of trying to understand myself, how to solve this, how do I cure my depression, but also like just be happier and be more clear on where I'm going and stuff like that. And I think the years of doing that equipped me for not just, I guess, getting through that depression and surviving, but then equipped me to then thrive. And, I've always been passionate about personal development. It's a big part of who I am. So to answer your question specifically, I think personal development inevitably takes you down a path of asking these types of questions, like, what do I want to do with my life? What fulfills me? Being intentional about the direction you're taking. And I knew very early on I wanted to like help and teach and coach, and I've always been like that. It really juices me. When I go off a coaching call, I'm just so energized. I just absolutely love it. I know that that's like my calling, and something I just really love. When I was trying to become financially free, that period of my life, it was a bit more of an idea. I just want to be financially free. That was all that mattered, because I was like, once I get there, then I can then start to actually live my life. The problem is, and a lot of people will say, when you listen to people who've gotten to a similar part of the journey, when you get there, it then comes with its own challenges, because when you're getting up every day and you need to work because you've got to make money, or you're trying to strive to that next promotion, and just to like either just to pay your bills, or because you want to create that financial success, life is pretty simple, because once you take away time working, sleeping, seeing friends, seeing a partner, doing some hobbies, like that's all your time. When you stop working, you're like, okay, now what? And that's great, but it's also hard, because you're like, well, what do I pick? You can kind of have anything, do anything, but whatever you choose to do, you're kind of always thinking, oh, what, should I do this? Should I do that? And I've gone on a real journey with that over the last few years, and various things have come up, and there's been different phases of that. And, so I've traveled a lot, and it's been amazing, and living in different countries like Bali, like Portugal. But then I'm like, do I stay there? Do I go somewhere else? So I don't know, and we can get into that a bit more. But it's you go through a bit of an existential crisis. That's probably the best word to put it.
That makes sense. Something I was thinking about, or really wanted to ask about, was earlier on in the journey, when you mentioned like a period of depression. What advice would you give yourself back then? You now going back, is there something you wish you'd found faster? A person you wish you'd found faster? Either someone or someone in the a public figure. What kind of resources or advice would you give yourself?
So I must have had depression for maybe 4 years or something. Mainly really university, and that was because I could manage it. I could stay in and out of depression, and it'd be fine, because I didn't really turn up to lectures. I could just cram before the exams and kind of get by. I solved it when I left uni, started a job, and within a few months I almost got fired because of my depression, because I wasn't showing up, I wasn't performing. And it was only then that I was like, I need to solve this. I need to fix this, because otherwise I'm going to lose my job, and then all of what I've worked for I'm going to lose. So I had a lot of leverage. And I think when you've got a lot of leverage, it's a lot easier to solve a problem, because your brain is compelled to go, I need to fix this. And that's what I did. I took massive action, and there was loads of things I did. I mean, the key things that really helped was only positive music, positive conversations, no like hanging around with negative people, exercising a lot, telling people, being honest. This is probably one of the most important things. Just being honest and saying, I've got depression, I'm struggling with this. Telling people, friends, family members, acquaintances, like, this isn't something I have shame around, like, just this is something I'm working through. And once I externalized it like that, it just, most of the energy around it just melted away. And I think this is the same with a lot of mental health stuff. Our brain's so mental. When we think about stuff, it just cycles and cycles and cycles and cycles, and it takes a life of its own, and it just gets bigger and louder. When you say it, it stops it in its tracks, because you say it and you're like, oh, it's actually not that big a thing. So to answer your question directly, I would probably say try to create that leverage sooner, so I could have stopped it much earlier. And in particular, take those steps and be honest with people about what was going on. I had a partner at the time. while I was at uni early on. And I ended it with her in part because I had depression. And I didn't even tell her I had depression at the time. Crazy. So, but we live and we learn.
Interesting. The phrase massive action, which you've said a couple of times, how would you define that? What does massive action look like?
So this is a core quality of me. I think there's certain things I'm probably quite good at. And one is when I put my mind to something, I'll like really go after it. And it's a matter of when, not if. So I think this is really at the heart of achieving big things. If you can get your brain to think, right, this is going to happen. It's just a matter of when. I just need to just keep at it and keep at it until I get it. When the brain believes that, it's just kind of all in, and then it just does everything it needs to do to get it. If you're thinking, oh, I hope I get this thing, I'm going to try to get this thing, most likely you're not, and you're most likely not going to do much to do it, because your brain is kind of half thinking, well, I probably won't get it, I might get it. So it's not that invested. The brain's quite clever in that it's constantly trying to preserve energy. And so if it doesn't think you're going to achieve something, after the willpower subsides, it's going to work against you. It's going to prevent you from taking action against it, because it's thinking, what's the point? Why waste your time on this thing? So massive action is really just doing lots and lots and lots and lots, just doing everything you can possibly think of to achieve the thing that you're wanting to. A good example is my health. 7 years ago, is it 7 years ago? Yeah. I got really unwell. I mean, so unwell that I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink, I couldn't go out, like couldn't drink alcohol, like nothing. Like I was permanently in pain. I had no energy, brain fog. I mean, I was totally messed. I was basically sitting on the sofa all day.
To confirm, when this came to a head, when this with health crisis spiked, where were you in the financial freedom journey?
It was probably like a couple of years. I don't know. It's hard to remember the exact timing. It's probably like a couple of years or 3 years before the end, something like that. 2 or 3 years before the end. And it was that really that actually, again, gave me the leverage to say, I need to actually start doing what I want to do, because I was doing what most people do, which is like they've got these dreams of what they want to do, and they think, oh, I'm just going to do this, I'm going to do that, and then I'll do it. I'll do this, and then I'll do it. But then when I got so unwell, I thought, geez, if I don't do it now, I may never do it. I mean, I was so unwell, I thought like, I don't have many more years in me. I had so little energy, and I had all these grand plans for myself to do coaching, to help people, to create financial freedom, to like travel the world, do all this cool stuff. And I just thought like, God, like what a sad life if like I just never get to do any of that stuff. So, I mean, I took a year out of work. I stopped working for like a year through trying to solve my house stuff. In classic my form, I then started alongside really starting this fledgling business of coaching and helping people in this space, because I thought, well, I've got to do at least as much as I possibly can now, because this could just get worse. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does, in terms of like going right back to massive action, and then also in terms of where you were in the journey. And you took time off work at EY, or at EY. Cool.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. But it was being off, and that unwell. It allowed me to take a step back and do nothing for a while and go, like, what do I actually want to do? So ironically, when I got well enough, and I was certainly not very well, but just like well enough to even be able to do some work, I decided at that point I'm going to leave, and then I went freelance, which on the face of it seems crazy that I would, having just got so unwell that I couldn't work, to that get just enough well to start working again, to then quit what is a very reliable job with sick pay and all of that, to then go independent with none of the protection. But in its own way, it gave me more freedom and protection because I was able to kind of actually create it myself. It's hard to explain, but
Would you have, in hindsight, have done it sooner, maybe even later?
if I could do everything again, I wouldn't have gone to uni,
Interesting.
and I definitely wouldn't have gone and done the corporate thing at all. I think I hated it. I hated the politics and wearing a suit and all of that. I hated it. I mean, I had to force my way through it. It was willing myself through to, because I was just trying to get it to the other side. I think I've always really been more of a kind of entrepreneur and a business person and wanting to do stuff on my terms, really. And I think a lot more people than in reality, certainly in the UK, really want that but aren't doing it. And I think one of the main problems is there's just no role models for it in the UK. It's quite uncommon to do your own thing in the UK. Most successful people I know do it through employment, through working for a company. It's quite unusual to do your own thing and certainly to make good money that way, which I think is a real shame. I mean, in countries like the US, it's much more common and popular.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I moved to Bali, because it attracts that type of person. There's lots of people from all over the world that do lots of interesting stuff, working for themselves, and make really good money. And I mean, I live between Bali and here in London, and London's amazing and it's full of incredible people and there's lots going on. There's not actually that many, at least I don't know that many people that are self-employed doing their own thing. Most people, even if they're doing well financially, they're doing it through corporate, essentially.
I think there is definitely a reflection on particularly US versus British culture of, in one sense, Americans tend to be, like very enthusiastic, which can, has a negative side. It can be off-putting. But on the other side, British culture does still have that stiff upper lip, like not wanting to show too much enthusiasm. And I think in the entrepreneurial space, that definitely comes through.
Yeah, and on that, I've often said I don't feel British. I am British and I have a lot of British qualities. But in this respect, I do not feel British. It frustrates me within the UK that people are like this. And they will try and put other people down if they take a stand for who they are and how good they are and all the great stuff they're doing. I just don't get it. Like, you are going to be far more successful if you stand up and feel like you're doing a great job and tell people you're doing a great job, and then other people are celebrating that and you're talking about this. And there's other complications with American culture, but in this respect they're much better at that. Australians are really good at it as well. So I think we've got a bit to learn from these other cultures.
For sure. And then a question on creating that culture, like you creating that culture in groups of friends, groups of people. Would you be able to talk a little bit about the retreats that you've organized and that we've been on together, and the whole kind of thought process behind that, and particularly the kind of cultural aspect of it in terms of like shared celebration of success?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of I mean, when I was growing up, I really struggled because I would often feel like from friends of mine, I was regularly told, no, you can't say that, can't be like that. That's not what we do within our friendship group or being British or whatever. And I really hated it because I felt like I had to hide parts of who I was. And show a dumbed down version. And yeah, I mean, I really struggled with it. And I think it really came to a head when I moved to London and I had a load of friends from university and we were living together. And I just thought, this is so boring. We're not having any meaningful conversations. It's just relentless banter. You know, anything that's not socially acceptable within a particular framework is chastised. And at the same time, I was going on a personal development journey around navigating my depression and stuff. And one of the things I realized through it was I need to actively choose my friendship group, because we are ultimately the average of the people we hang out with. So pretty much overnight, I literally fired most of my old friends and systematically built up a friendship group, initially through a personal development community that I was part of. It was an international personal development group that ended up, I was a member, and then ended up running the London chapter, then the UK chapter, then the European chapter. And I was very into that for a few years. And then I moved away from that and started to I started to find friends, find people that I really connected with and had what I would say had a really good energy. And I went through a period of organizing dinners and socials, and I would bring these people together, and I started to build this friendship group. And that was the initial start of the friendship group you came to know of and how we met. I would do a lot of these types of socials and really just created what I wanted, because most people I felt weren't like that. So people that were not just accepting of who I was and who each person was within the group, but also encouraged it and supported that, and celebrated how we were all different. There was a lot of love in the group, which I feel like you probably related to. And I mean, I loved it. It was a lovely space. I mean, so much so that whenever people came out with us, I mean, people were magnetized to it, because it's so unusual to be part of a group where everyone's like, hey, come in, meet everybody, let's have a great time. And to feel that is quite rare, I think, certainly within the UK. That then morphed into these retreats you're talking about, because I started to just get more and more busy and wanting to spend less time on these types of things. And I started seeing a lot of the people I respected and were role models to me publicly. And I noticed a lot of them were doing something similar, because they were time poor, wanted to be around a lot of high value people, catch up with existing friends, meet new people, do cool, amazing adventures, learn cool stuff. And they wanted to do all of that together, right? Because when you struggle with time, then the more things you can do in the same time, then the far more effective the use of your time is. And they all did some form of this. So essentially, I was trying to create my own version of it, because I didn't know any example of that within my own sphere. So I thought, well, if it's not there, I might as well just create it myself.
Yep.
So I just took all the awesome people in my life, including yourself. I said, right, let's go somewhere for a week, and let's just have a great time. Let's hang out with friends that we know, meet some cool new people. Let's go do some cool mad stuff like skydiving or go-karting or jet skiing or whatever. Let's go somewhere different, so some different part of the UK, or go to other countries like Bali or Lanzarote or Tenerife. Enjoy, so it feels like a holiday, feels like an experience in itself. And also, let's be quite structured around what we're doing. Let's learn from each other. I mean, there's a lot of value in the room. Let's leverage that. So, facilitated sessions on financial freedom, but we did like breaking through limiting beliefs. We did health and longevity, lots of different stuff based on the expertise in the room, because, who doesn't want to level up? I think that the last thing was this kind of accountability. So there's kind of regularity of coming and going, right, how was the last 6 months? Let's take stock. How did we do? What were the successes? What were the challenges? But then also, what's the plan for the next 6 months? And from experience, when you've got that accountability, there's a lot of people that you respect in a room that you've essentially said, right, I want to go away and do X, Y, and Z, that you're much more compelled to do it because you want to show up and go, yeah, I went and did that and I showed up, and because you want to be seen as someone with high integrity.
I definitely feel like one of the biggest things I felt from the whole kind of accountability piece was previously a lot of the stuff that we kind of like talked about in the retreat had been stuff that I'd done very solo, like myself reading books or in my own head, or even like journaling or watching like YouTube videos, whatever it was. It was quite like a solo experience. We definitely speak about it a bit with like friends and family, and certainly had great conversations around it. But it was on a different level on the retreats in terms of like, you wouldn't just say a goal. People would like interrogate your goal in the most positive way. And I personally really like, one, I think it was beneficial naturally, but also I just enjoyed it so much.
Great example is that something like this podcast. I think if you just meet and catch up with people, you tend to revert to quite a superficial conversation. So I think it's really important sometimes, not always, but sometimes to create a bit of structure and intentionality around a conversation or what we're doing with our time to get out these things. There's so much that was even people I knew for years. I was like, I couldn't believe that they knew this thing or that they'd done this thing, because it just hadn't come up in conversation. But when you force people to kind of go, right, what do you know that you're passionate about that you'd love to share? A lot comes from that.
Like that. What advice would you give to someone younger, either in the UK or in another country, who likes the sound of that kind of thing? How would you advise them to take massive action around creating that kind of culture, friendship culture in their life?
I think you first need to think like, what do I want from my life? And who do I want to be around? So like, rather than basing on who you already know, start with a blank page. Like, what do I actually want my life to be like? Start with the end in mind. And then think, okay, well, based on all of that, who do I currently know that fits that? Like, that I actively want to keep in touch with and spend time with because they are aligned with and they support where I'm going or want to go. Then actively start looking for other people that match that. And I think you don't have to over engineer it, just being mindful of that and being intentional about it. So when you're going out and you're hanging out with people, you're meeting people, you've got that in your head and you're sussing people out. You're like, is this person on that same wavelength? One of the easiest ways is to talk about your ideal life and where you're going, where you want to be. And are they resonating with, oh my God, that's so good, that's so true. So for example, one of my good friends, Dan, I met him at a property meetup. And most people I meet at property meetups, I'm just like, I just don't connect with. But I met Dan and immediately we connected. I was talking about, where I was going and what I was trying to do. And he was like, yeah, I'm doing the same thing. And da, 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 da. I was like, awesome. This guy's on the same wavelength to me. This guy's on the same path. And off the back of that, we ended up doing business together and we're still very good friends now. So I think it's just having those types of conversations and being mindful of it. And then I guess the last thing is some kind of like meetup or community of people that are typically doing that kind of thing. I mean, I did it through personal development, because if you go to any kind of personal development event or workshop or whatever, you've got people who are choosing to spend their time bettering themselves. So it typically goes hand in hand.
Cool. That makes sense. And then to completely flip this, what in your view are potentially some of the negative things that can come in the personal development area, or challenges that you've got to watch out for if you're going into that space?
I mean, probably the biggest one is the whole scammy side of it. It's a real shame. And it's always been there, but It's gotten so much worse in the last, 10, 15 years, which is a real shame, because I think what happened is a lot of people came to space because they wanted to do good and they're passionate about personal development and they wanted to impart knowledge. But then obviously to make money from that space, you need to sell yourself, and you need to sell what you're providing. So you need to learn marketing and sales. I think over time what's happened is people have gone, well, I need to focus on the sales and marketing because that's how I make the money. And then over time it's just got worse and worse to the point where like, well, actually that's the only thing I need to focus on, because that's the only thing that makes me money. Actually the rest is just superficial. So there is definitely a higher incidence of these people trying to sell you these $10,000 courses online, to YouTube, to workshops, free courses that you go, and then there's a massive upsell. And it's such a shame, because it's given the whole industry a really bad name. A lot, I'm very passionate about personal development, and I said again, in UK culture, a lot of people are so anti it, for this same reason of, you have to have a problem to do personal development. Like, that's weird. Like, I'm good on my own. It's a very British kind of tendency. And that's fine. Not everyone has to do it if you're not into it. But I think a lot of people switch off from it just because they have the perception of it, or other people's perception of them if they were to do something like that. Same as if you were to do therapy or coaching or something. And then on top of that, you've got this whole, so people have heard people being scammed, or they've been scammed themselves, or they've experienced this and gone, oh, this whole industry is terrible. But there's so much amazing value. So one of the first things, that really impressed me, there's lots of personal development stuff I did, but Tony Robbins, for example, and he is a controversial character. A lot of people don't like him. He's loud, he's intense, he's quite forceful. He's not for everyone. And I'm not saying everyone should do it, but my life would not be like it was today if I hadn't gone and done some of the Tony Robbins stuff. I went and did some of his seminars at the UPW, Unleash the Power Within, which was his main like entry thing. I did Date with Destiny, which is the more kind of high level one out in America. I did Life Mastery, Wealth Mastery, and they were profound. They had a lasting impact on me. You can't just go and turn up and then that's it. I'm kind of cured or whatever. But my life genuinely was never the same again, having gone and done something like that. So putting time and attention on personal development will improve your life, and the more you do it, and the better you're going to be. You can do it personally, like you kind of said, sitting at home watching YouTube videos, studying yourself. You can do it through friends, actively, intentionally, through masterminds, through retreats. And you can also do it through kind of workshops, through seminars, by someone running something that's really high impact, intense. There's a period of your life where that's what you're focused on. And that is a real helpful addition. Just like almost going to a Buddhist retreat really helps, because for that period of time, that is all you are focused on, and you can start to really go deep on, what do I want for my life? What are the challenges? What's getting in the way? And you're surrounded by people in the same place. So
you mentioned masterminds. I think a lot of people will have no idea what a mastermind is.
Okay. Yeah. I've been doing this for years and years and years. I think it's so powerful. I've run a few. A mastermind, and there's lots of ways it could go, but I'll give you one of the main examples. Is essentially you get a small group of people together, most effective between 4 and 6 people, and you essentially take it in turns to give an update on where you are at, and then present a problem to the group that needs solving. So the two main values of this is, one, you are regularly updating a small group of people on what's going on in your life. So someone really knows and understands what's going on for you. A lot of people, most people don't do this with people. Most people don't really, outside of their partner, They don't really know, even with friends. So it's this intentionality, like, yeah, this is what's going on, and everyone's like supporting on where you're at and where you're going and your challenges, and then in addition, you bring a challenge, and it could be small, it could be massive, it could be, I won't give into examples, but it doesn't really matter what the problem is. It's just whatever feels right for them at the time. You raise it and you say, hey, this is my problem. And then you spend a little time within the group brainstorming how to solve that problem. And at the very least, you are just externalizing that problem, and they're supporting you on getting clear on what the solution is and making sure you follow through on that. But often actually getting these external perspectives from people you respect, triangulating from these other people, it's a massive impact, because you think, oh geez, yeah, I never thought about that. And it helps you, get to a solution much quicker and more effectively.
Do you have an example maybe from the past few years of something that you brought to a mastermind, and then someone's either supportive or contrasting input that they gave you?
I mean, from really, really small examples, like I'm feeling unproductive at work. I'm struggling to get up early in the morning, to I have an addiction and I've not told anyone else. I have this really serious health problem that I've not told anyone because I'm embarrassed by it, and I have shame around it. Some really, really vulnerable things that, again, I've got goosebumps just remembering, because often people have these things that are going on in their lives and they're just trying to solve it themselves. They're not telling anyone because they have shame, they've got embarrassment, they feel vulnerable around it, and they're ignoring it. And it takes being in something like this and then knowing that these people have got your back, you trust them, it's a safe space, and them saying, come on, what's really going on? And then you kind of think, oh, okay, I've got to say this. And then it's so powerful, and I've done it with things in my life, and I've experienced other people, telling me things. So yeah, addictions, relationship stuff, libido stuff, like, really serious health stuff, like really big stuff that, like, makes me sad thinking about it now, when as I remember them.
Yeah, makes sense. And you mentioned oftentimes when someone has these things going on in their life, the person that they speak to about it is their partner. And now, often, it makes a lot of sense to share things with your partner, but sometimes it's a lot of pressure for one person's partner to be so many different things, or even possibly provide so many different inputs. So I imagine that's a nice, like, balancing counterweight to a person's life to have, that connection or a similar connection with other people.
Yeah, 100%. It takes the pressure off the relationship. What if you're not in a relationship? Inevitably you're going to present it in a certain way because they're your partner, right? And they'll have their own stuff going on. What if they are not equipped to deal with that thing? What if it triggers them? What if something's getting where you actually telling them, also is just one thing less that you're having to bring to the relationship. You can focus on actually just having an awesome relationship.
Makes sense. And then jumping back a bit to the whole financial freedom, wealth building piece, where do you feel you're at with that right now, and what are you focusing on? And is there somewhere else you'd like to go with it, or are you now fully focusing your attention on the coaching? Or
So I'm in lifestyle design at the moment. So I'm trying to really get clear on, like, how do I want my life to look? Creating that, doing that, and then testing it and saying, like, is that actually what I want? So in many ways, my life is really amazing. And I went to an ideal life exercise recently. I was with my partner, and we went to this beautiful cabin in Bali in the jungle. And it's actually
it's the
where I
one.
took you, because it left such an imprint. I was like, I got to get you guys there, and I got to get you to do the same exercise. And I mean, because I went, and it was just like a beautiful. It was this standalone cabin on stilts, floating essentially in the rainforest with 360-degree views. Couldn't see any other cabin. It was impeccably done. I mean, it was like something off like an interior design magazine.
And the view from it was so beautiful that we were almost debating like where was the sun? Like, was that the reflection of the sun in the? If you remember, Roddy was like,
Right.
"Oh, is that the sun, or is that the reflection of the sun in the clouds, or is the reflection on the water the sun?" Like, it was this amazing kind of like watercolor painting on the horizon.
Yeah, I mean, it was ethereal. You know, it was because you had this. I mean, it was basically all jungle, and there was just this opening that you could see out, and you could see like the whole landscape and the sea in the background. And I mean, oh, and remember there was the pool with the infinity pool, right? You're like sitting in this like jacuzzi, looking out over all of this, and there was the big fireplace, and it was all kind of anything you wanted they would saw. It was kind of that type of vibe. So it really got me into this mode of like, you know, this is exactly what I want. You know, this kind of like lifestyle. So I sat down, I did my ideal life exercise, and I kind of what was my ideal day and the various things I wanted to do. And most of it I'm already doing, which was great. But there were like a few little things that I wanted to add. I mean, essentially it was kind of get up without an alarm clock, morning ritual, including reading, exercise, then spend half a day doing some work on whatever passion projects I'm doing at the time. And then in the evening, kind of finish up like early evening, late afternoon, and do something either with a friend, with my partner, or, you know, by myself. And yeah, most of that I was doing outside of just being a bit more structured in when things started and ended. So I think a big part of it was, yeah, environment, and making sure the environment was, you know, very aesthetic and inspiring. It was pretty good. I mean, Bali is beautiful. I think there was various things I could tune up around that. A big thing was having more presence online. So, you know, up to now, really, most of what I've done has come from my own personal network. Most of my coaching is through personal network. Most of the people I invest for is my personal network. Most people I help is that way. And so I think I'd like to do it on a larger scale, and to, I guess, have the network that comes with that, especially as I'm traveling more. So that piece, yeah.
What would you, as an online presence, what would you want to be known for? What would you want people to search and you come up? What would be the kind of ideal sentence or collection of words?
I mean, long term, all the areas that I'm passionate about. I mean, the most obvious one is financial freedom, because I think that's where I can add the most value. You know, most people are struggling with it. Most people want it. I've solved it. You know, it's and it's something I spend a lot of time, you know, studying and understanding. But the other areas I'm very passionate about are relationships, health. You know, I've gone on a really long journey to get to where I am now. I mean, I would not be here if I had not gone and taken massive action around solving my health. What are the other key areas? Lifestyle design is a big thing for me, and personal development generally, you know, business stuff, entrepreneur stuff. You know, really, I think I guess behind it all, it's lifestyle design. It's really thinking, what do I want for my life? And then actually doing that. Because, okay, so my favorite quote ever is Margaret Williamson. I'm pretty sure her name is. And it's, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. It is that we are powerful beyond measure. So the reason that is my favorite quote is that what that quote is essentially saying is that on the surface, people think the thing that they're scared about is being insecure, inadequate, they're not good enough. And that's true, that goes on for people. But what is much deeper than that is that we actually know we have this enormous potential, but we are not living it.
Gotcha. Oh,
So and again, I'm getting okay, a lot of goosebumps in this interview, because deep down we know we can do so much, and we're not doing it, and it's easier to just pretend that that is not the case, because it's because then we don't have to then go and try it and then worry about failing at it. So I think it's about owning that and going, yeah, actually, there's so much I can do. I just need to go out and do it and go start down that path of living it and building that. So
Cool. I like that. And then what is the book that you'd most recommend to people?
well, it depends.
True.
Where they're at, what they're trying to solve, what they're looking for.
Maybe for someone who's in their early 20s, or someone in their 20s, someone in their 30s, and yeah, is that maybe a good way of categorizing it? Or would it be something for health, something for wealth, and something for relationships?
Okay. So, I mean, so there's certain books that are like often touted as like, I mean, this book is amazing and changed my life. And so I'm going to repeat them, because if you haven't read them, then you've got to read them because they're amazing. And one is Think and Grow Rich. I mean, incredible book, life-changing for me. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, again, incredible book. Not a massive fan of where he's taken his whole franchise.
Yeah.
And he's, quite a controversial character. And, I think he's kind of over monetized it. But that book is incredible. So, yeah, those two are very powerful. If from a kind of wanting to transform your life and take it down a much more effective path. Millionaire Fast Lane is incredible for another reason. Again, it completely, you read it and you think, whoa, I just see the world totally different now. From a relationship point of view, there's lots of books I could recommend, but I think understanding attachment styles in people is really important, especially if you're coming to later on in your life and you're looking for a partner, because whilst most people have a secure attachment style, as you get later on in life, the percentage of people who don't have a secure attachment style, so an anxious or an avoidant attachment style, way higher, because those people, it's for that reason, they're often not in a relationship.
Interesting. Oh, so I initially thought you were saying in terms of people maybe become more aware of which way they're leaning, but you're saying no, it's because people have an extreme attachment style that they haven't found someone who they click with, and then so that's really interesting.
Yeah, because if you have a secure attachment style, you met someone you were like 19 and whatever, you're still in a relationship. So
unless one is anxious and the other's avoidant, and then they act.
But even then, that can cause so much turmoil that you often end.
For sure.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the one that's most sticky between the two for obvious reasons. But yeah, if this is not making sense to you, if you're watching this, if you're actively wanting to get into a good relationship, understanding attachment styles, being able to identify your own attachment style, the attachment style of the person you're courting, dating, is really, really important, and bringing awareness to that, because it is the biggest thing that I see play out in relationships, in my own and in other relationships around me.
Gotcha. I like that. And any kind of final resources, not necessarily a book, but just anything that you think this was something I either did, went to, or a person that you think has such a huge impact that you just kind of want the world to know about it?
I mean, you also asked about health. So I was trying to think, what's the best book I've listened to around health? It's not directly health, but I think it is related. It's David Goggins.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, his first book, Can't Hurt Me, it was super powerful to read. I related to a lot of his journey, having had a very difficult upbringing, and learning to turn that into a power rather than, a weakness and something you're struggling with. And it's just hugely inspirational. I mean, like whenever I'm a bit down and low energy, feeling in a bit of a funk, I just read that, and I'm so inspired and so just juiced, because he has this way of just cutting through it all. So I mean, I think that was huge. I don't think it was anything else. I guess it depends. I mean, we talked about lots of different areas. It maybe give me a specific scenario and I can tell you where I would point someone in.
A specific scenario maybe would be someone who has absolutely no idea what to do next. They just know that they are unhappy where they are right now, and they're like, fuck, I need to sort my life out, but I have no idea what sorting my life out even looks like. Like, where do I begin? Where do I look to? What could I do? How can I run experiments in my life to try that out? Yeah, someone who is like completely like.
So I think the two best things you can do is, one, read certain books that are inspirational for that. Think and Grow Rich is an obvious one. How to Win Friends and Influence People, I think, is another big one. The Tim Ferriss 4-Hour Work Week is really good at just, you want to read something that just totally changes your perspective and helps you see what's possible. That's why some of these books are so powerful, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, because you're like, oh, I can see that I can go all the way over here and do this and do that. And if you're struggling to understand what to do, then you need that. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, you need to find a community of people on this similar path, either trying to do it as well or further along the way. And some kind of personal development community is the best way of doing that, and I've done various ones. Meetup.com is great. Just go on there and look for some kind of personal development event. Go on YouTube and just find YouTube content around personal development, what you resonate with. Find different people. Once you start thinking, oh yeah, I really vibe with this person, I connect with his content or their content, her content, and then see if they're doing anything, whether they're running like online workshops or physical workshops, and go and actually attend in person or online. I mean, ideally in person, because, when I went and did like physical workshops, you're in a room with all these people all trying to do the same thing. It's inspiring. You meet great people, and you're way more compelled to do it because, again, you're now in an environment where everyone else is doing that same thing, right? Rather than going out and hanging with the friends that you're currently hanging out with. If they're not on that path, it's going to be very hard to fight that.
And then a final question in terms of thinking about yourself in 10, maybe even 20 years time. What would that version of yourself be looking back and be like, remember this, or don't forget this, or here is the advice?
So what do I think my self in 10 or 20 years time would tell me right now?
Exactly.
That's an interesting question. I think don't stress so much.
That's a super interesting one. Just I was just thinking about a lot of the things that we've described. I realize I completely interrupt, but I think one of the things that we've just talked about, and this kind of goes to the theme of the podcast as well, is like a lot of like overthinking and over analyzing and appeals to certain personality types. But there'll be a lot of people watching this being like, "Oh, that looks stressful." So it's interesting that maybe the advice you're saying is don't stress about it. So I won't interrupt anymore, but I thought that was an interesting reflection.
It's a good point. I mean, I guess that's why I'm stressed. I often get stressed. It's a different one. I remember, I remember telling a friend, I was sitting there thinking, what am I doing? I've got a good life. I'm making all this money and, I've got an easy life. Why am I compelled to go off and do all this other stuff? It's really annoying because I'm just making life hard for myself. Why can't I just chill and do this? And she said, because the reality is the personality of you that has gotten you to this place is the same personality that is compelling you to go off and do more and more and more and more. So I think there is an element of just accepting who we are and like human beings don't want to be happy. We want to grow. I think really we want to be fulfilled. Like, this is what's actually more important to humans. This is why we're constantly obsessed with doing more and going to the moon and all this kind of stuff. It's within our DNA. It's instinct. But at the same time, don't get consumed by that. Don't get sucked into it. Don't be like, oh, I need to do more and be better, and just be able to enjoy where you are. Like, this is the thing I'm wrestling with at the moment. I'm constantly like, am I having enough fun? Am I like socializing enough? Am I doing enough hobbies? Like, do I want to go like learn Spanish, do this, do that? And I'm like, I think just being at peace with where you're at, what you're doing, I think is so, so important, because then we're able to actually enjoy the fruits of our labor and the position we're in and the things that we're doing and things we choose to do. And which is why a big thing for me, at least in the moment, has been for the last few years, is meditation, because it quietens the mind and puts the mind in that much more relaxed, at peace place, which for someone like me who's a bit kind of type A, can be just hugely helpful.
Nice. I like that. Cool. Okay, we'll end on that note. Thank you very much, man.
Thanks, man.